was. Now...
The two who were with me in my landing craft, they used to come with me here every year, but unfortunately I now come on my own, which is very sad, but there you go.
And let's go right up to present day. In Barry Dor, you've served in Iraq, you've served in Afghanistan, and of course today really has have special poignancy, doesn't it?
Most definitely. First of all, I'd like to say to remember our fallen who died in combat, but also what is also very important is to show our support to the families of those who have fallen.
It's a wonderful atmosphere as well though today, a real sort of sense of solidarity, of comradeship.
You've got Royal Marines, soldiers, sailors and airmen showing that we're all part of one big family fighting for our nation.
And you'll all be marching together?
Most definitely.
Now the ritual here at the Cenotaph begins with the music played by the mass bands of the Guards Division, the pipes and drums of the 5th Battalion, the Royal Regiment of Scotland, the band of the Royal Marines, the band, buglers and trumpeters of the Royal Air Force, under the baton this morning of Lieutenant Colonel Graham Jones. And the music begins with Rule Britannia. The pipes and drums of the Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders now take over the music with the Skye Boat Song. The bands now play Isle of Beauty. The names of the dead in our present wars are read out each week in the House of Commons. Their photographs are displayed in the newspapers. And Craig Barber was one of those faces. He was a private in the 2nd Battalion Royal Welsh. He was nearing the end of his second tour of duty in Iraq when he was killed driving his Warrior armoured vehicle.
Well, Craig was very caring, you know, he always put people before himself. He was an amazing father, teaching Bradley everything. Craig was loud, but not in an obnoxious way, you know. If he was the only person in the house was full with just him, you know. He went out in the May, and it would have been our first wedding anniversary at the end of August. So he'd arranged his R&R to come back. When Craig died, it was 11 days before he's due to fly home for R&R.
Yeah.
We do talk about him all the time. Sometimes he'll just come out with, oh, I miss my daddy.
Who's this? My daddy loves me. That's me.
Yeah, he was a baby.
He kisses his pictures and he likes doing things that his daddy did, like going to play football and remembering going swimming with his dad and stuff like that, so it'll never be forgotten in his mind. When Craig died, I used to go and sit out in the garden by myself, my little bit of peace and quiet, time to think. And I used to look up at the top of the mountain, and just one day I thought, you know, I'm going to walk up that mountain on his first anniversary and I'm going to plant a flag there for him, and it's there for everybody to see.
This is where Craig played as a young boy in the forestries. This is where he came and played fox and hounds with all his friends, and he used to play armies in the forestry as well. The whole of this, he owned this. This was his valley. And this is where his army career began, really, for want of a better word. I said, hey, take the little dog with you. No, he gives the show away. He lets the enemy know where I am. And this is where he played. Oh, he was really proud. Gosh, the day he came home and said, Mum, I'm a tank driver now and I've been chosen by the commander to drive his tank. That 4-year-old boy I had came back. That little spark in his eye, it was there. The phone rang. It was 20 to 12 in the night. Nobody rings me at 20 to 12 in the night. So when that phone rang, I knew before I picked that phone up there was bad news on the other end of the phone, and it was actually the notifying officer. Briefly started to introduce himself, and I said, I'm going to stop you there, I've lost him. Yes, he said, you've lost him.
Craig died doing something he loved, but he was also doing something for the country. We're really proud of him. We want everybody to know that. We want people to know what he did and that we're so very proud of him.
Every single day I open my curtains and I can see the flag every day, and that is a memory for me that people come up here, because I can see those people coming up to the flag, sitting quietly, and I think to myself, somebody's remembering my boy.
The many hundreds gathered at the Cenotaph, the thousands waiting for the march past, stand still and silent as the music changes to Purcell, Dido's lament. When I am laid in earth, remember me, but forget my fate. The clergy, led by the Bishop of London, and preceded by the children and gentlemen of the Chapel Royal, and the cross adorned with red poppies, come out to take their place for the short service that follows the 2-minute silence. The Prime Minister, the Leader of the Opposition, and other politicians go to take their place. And now the Chief of the Defence Staff, Air Chief Marshal Sir Jock Stirrup, the First Sea Lord, Admiral Sir Mark Stanhope, the Chief of the General Staff, General Sir David Richards, took over from Richard Dannett in August, served a year in Afghanistan, and the Chief of the Air Staff, Air Chief Marshal Sir Stephen Dalton, with their wreaths, and they're followed by the merchant and civilian services representatives there. And next, coming out of the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, the many representatives, High Commissioners of the Commonwealth. The religious representatives from the Roman Catholic Church, the Hebrew congregations, the Free Churches, the Buddhist faith, the Methodist Conference, the Muslim Council, the United Reformed Church, the Hindu temples, the Baptist Union, the Sikh organizations, Unitarian and Free Christian churches, and Reformed Judaism. So now the scene around the Cenotaph is almost complete. We await just the arrival of the Queen and the royal procession as we approach 11 o'clock. On the balcony, watching Princess Alexandra and Vice Admiral Timothy Lawrence, husband to the Princess Royal. The royal party led by the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh. And for the first time, Prince Henry of Wales is representing his father, the Prince of Wales, who's away in Canada, and will be laying a wreath on his behalf. And other members of the royal family and their equerries who carry their wreaths come out with 1 minute to go before 11 o'clock. Majesty the Queen, as head of the armed forces, will be handed her wreath and will lay it at the cenotaph on behalf of the whole nation. And now other members of the royal family will lay their wreaths, the Duke of Edinburgh first, in the uniform of an Admiral of the Fleet. He opened the Field of Remembrance at Westminster Abbey on Thursday, and in 3 days from now will again be at Westminster for a service to mark the death of the last soldier of the First World War. Prince Henry of Wales, better known to us as Harry, in the uniform of Lieutenant of the Household Cavalry, the Blues and Royals, laying this wreath on behalf of his father. It's his father's wreath with the Prince of Wales feathers, his father being away in Canada. Prince Henry served 2 months in Afghanistan last year and is now training to be a helicopter pilot. Next, his elder brother, Prince William, Flight Lieutenant in the Royal Air Force, training for search and rescue missions with the Royal Air Force at the moment. The Duke of York, in the uniform of a captain of the Royal Navy, who will be taking the salute on Horse Guards of the march past of the veterans who go down past the cenotaph, lay their wreaths past Downing Street, and then back across Horse Guards, and he'll be there. The Earl of Wessex, Honorary Royal Colonel of the 2nd Battalion, the Rifles, briefly served as a university cadet in the Royal Marines. The Princess Royal, in the uniform of a Rear Admiral of the Royal Navy. She is Chief Commandant for Women in the Royal Navy. It's one of 8 honorary ranks she holds, covering all 3 services. And the last member of the royal party, the Duke of Kent, Field Marshal, served 21 years in the army, who's president of the Commonwealth War Graves Commission that looks after those cemeteries all around the world where the British and Commonwealth dead are buried or remembered. Play Beethoven's Funeral March as the Prime Minister, Gordon Brown, leads the politicians in the laying of their wreaths. David Cameron, the leader of the opposition. Clegg, the leader of the Liberal Democrats, steps forward. From Northern Ireland, the leader of the Democratic Unionist Party, Peter Robinson. And next, representing the two nationalist parties, the Scottish National Party and Plaid Cymru, Angus Robertson, on behalf of the SNP, with a wreath with the words "Lest we forget" written in English, Gaelic and Welsh. With the special wreath made up by Kew Gardens with all sorts of plants in it, including olives from Gibraltar, tussock grass from the Falklands, the Foreign Secretary, David Miliband. Now the first group of High Commissioners come forward. From the old Commonwealth, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka and Ghana are there. Canadians perhaps remembering the 14,000 who landed on Juno Beach on D-Day, or Australia remembering that they, of all nations, took the highest casualties in World War I. Now Malaysia, Cyprus, Nigeria, Sierra Leone, Tanzania, Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago and Uganda. There were brigades from East and West Africa who served in Abyssinia in the Second World War. The High Commissioners of Kenya, Malawi, Malta, Zambia, the Gambia, Maldives, Singapore, Guyana and Botswana. High Commissioner from Fiji, who's among this group coming forward, may be remembering two Fijians, one from the Royal Regiment of Fusiliers, one from the 2nd Battalion, the Rifles, who were killed in Afghanistan. He's there with High Commissioners from Lesotho, Barbados, Mauritius, Swaziland, Tonga, Bangladesh, Bahamas, Grenada and Papua New Guinea. And the last group of High Commissioners from the Commonwealth of Dominica, from St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Belize, Antigua, Christopher and Nevis, and from Brunei and Namibia and Cameroon and Mozambique. Now the service chiefs, Admiral Sir Mark Stanhope of the Royal Navy, General Sir David Richards for the Army, and Air Chief Marshal Sir Stephen Dalton for the Royal Air Force. And finally the civilian chiefs, Captain Ian Gatt for the Merchant Navy and Fishing Fleets, himself a fisherman since he was 16 years old, Peter Garrett of the Merchant Air Services, who's the son of a man who flew with the ferrying pilots of planes, and the Chief Inspector of Constabulary, Dennis O'Connor, monitoring the work of the police forces.
O Almighty God, grant, we beseech thee, that we who here do honor to the memory of those who have died in the service of their country and of the crown may be so inspired by the spirit of their love and fortitude that, forgetting all selfish and unworthy motives, we may live only to thy glory and to the service of mankind. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Unto God's gracious mercy and protection we commit you. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. The Lord lift up the light of his countenance upon you and give you his peace this day and always. Amen.
Brief service over, the royal party leaves Whitehall, as will the clergy and the High Commissioners and others, to clear the way for what will be happening soon, which is the march past of the veterans. And now the religious procession leaves. The 10 children of the Chapel Royal, the boy choristers, dressed in gold and scarlet state coats designed for them at the time of the Restoration. facing at the Queen's Chapel and at the chapel at St James's. Followed by the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition and the other politicians who caught a glimpse there of the familiar face of Boris Johnson, Mayor of London, the new Speaker of the House of Commons on the right. And so the politicians leave, and they're followed by the ranks of the High Commissioners. You can see further up Whitehall the veterans who've been following this service, some of them able to watch television screens to see it, and they're waiting their turn to come down past the Cenotaph. The President of the Royal British Legion, Lieutenant General Sir John Kisley, with his wreath now. He won the Military Cross as a major in the Scots Guards during the Falklands War, when he was engaged in the battle to take Mount Tumbledown that opened the way to Stanley. And the Royal British Legion represented here because they do so much for ex-servicemen. Last year they raised £31 million, and I suspect this year they may have raised even more because of people's concern and worry about the families and the injured who returned from Iraq and Afghanistan. Cecilia Harper for the women's section, and Scotland and the Royal Naval Association, the Royal Air Force Association and the Royal Commonwealth Ex-Services League, and London Transport, Ron Howard at the front there. As they march back up Whitehall, the next event here is the start of the march past. There are 210 different groups here this year, people united by service they did together and by the memories of that, and bound together by that comradeship as they were in time of war. There's a good example from the 2nd Battalion of the Royal Regiment of Fusiliers, who came back last week from Helmand Province in Afghanistan. Their tour had lasted 6 months, and they'd lost 7 men.
A regiment's not just a collection of individual soldiers, it's a group brought together under a common ethos. So when we lose one of our fellow soldiers, it's felt by everybody in the regiment, and we all mourn their loss as if they were one of our own family. Sergeant Simon Valentine was killed while on foot patrol near Sang in northern Helmand.
You can't really sum him up. I mean, he was just a fantastic guy, really. He's got a lot to do as the platoon sergeant, always running around all over it, as he used to say. He used to sort of spend about 5 or 10 minutes with his hair on fire, and then eventually he'd get it all sorted, as he always did, and he used to come up to me and go, "See, boss, I told you, I'm awesome."
Sergeant Valentine, with his love of Superman and superheroes, all that kind of gear, like buying badges to wear out on patrol, wearing socks and boxers at Superman and superheroes. Other than that, he's definitely a great man, and if I could be half the man that he was, then I know I've done a good job in my life.
You could say that Val was your friend. He was truly blessed. To me, he was my best friend, and he used to always give his advice like any other friend, and he'll be truly missed.
Fusilier Sean Bush was attempting to rescue Sergeant Valentine when a second device exploded. He died of his wounds 10 days later.
He had been right at the front of the company finding improvised explosive devices and protecting his friends. And it was absolutely typical of the man that he received the injuries that were ultimately to result in his death, moving forward voluntarily into danger to help rescue somebody who'd already been hurt.
Fusilier Bush was a quiet, unassuming guy, very mild-mannered, nice tempo, nice temperament on him. He was always wearing his Coventry City shirt, which is an area where we recruit from in the West Midlands, and he was such a great, enthusiastic, keen sportsman.
Me and Bushy come quite close in Afghanistan. We used to go to the helicopter landing site with a can of pop and just sit and watch the sunset go down while talking about what's gone on. But at the end of it, he always used to say, "There's another day gone."
The battalion also lost Corporal Joseph Etchells, Fusilier Patero Susu, Fusilier Lewis Carter, and Fusilier Simon Annis. Lance Corporal James Fullerton was killed in the same explosion as Fusiliers Annis and Carter.
He was a monstrously fit, robust, focused infantry soldier and junior commander. He was the individual who, faced with the worst possible circumstances, could be relied upon to rally the troops, get them facing forward again, and lead the charge with renewed vigour.
Many times I trusted him with my own life, and I had no hesitation in doing so. He was a man of sort of immeasurable moral and physical courage. He was a rock to his soldiers, and I know they all adored him.
As a friend, you couldn't ask for anything more. You know, he had a great sense of humour, but on the other hand, if you were feeling down, he'd always take you to one side and he'd always make you feel better. He was unique. He was an absolute gem.
We do have a saying in the Royal Regiment of Fusiliers that once a Fusilier, always a Fusilier, and we will never forget those we lost this year in Afghanistan.
Every year a different organisation starts off this march past, chosen by the Royal British Legion somewhat haphazardly, but you can see 9,000 people. This is just part of them here. It was once estimated that if all the dead from the British and Commonwealth forces that served in all the wars from the First World War marched past the Cenotaph here this morning, the line would be starting here in London and the tail end of it would be in Edinburgh. Starting this year, the Royal Signals. First in, first out, they say, of any military operation. Seen action in most theatres of war. And they come down here, led by the band, and they'll hand their wreaths to the wreath takers at the Cenotaph. Then the Royal Signals, and they're followed by some of the bravest men in the services, the Association of Ammunition Technicians. No doubt remembering today Staff Sergeant Olaf Schmidt, who was killed last Saturday. The Home Guard. 1.5 million people signed up when the Home Guard was formed in the Second World War. Volunteers, all of them. From Northern Ireland, the Army Dog Unit marching for the first time. Volunteers who were trained as dog handlers, remembering 6 handlers who were killed during the Northern Ireland Troubles. Applause from those watching as the Gurkha Brigade comes past, announced this year after that great campaign led by Joanna Lumley that those who had at least 4 years service would be allowed to settle, if they chose, in the United Kingdom. They are fighting in Afghanistan and were on parade in the Hollow Square this morning. The British Limbless Ex-Servicemen's Association, LESMA, led by Colonel Jerome Church, who lost a leg in 1972 while leading a patrol in Northern Ireland. The ex-services Mental Welfare society, Combat Stress. It's the 90th anniversary of Combat Stress. Supported almost 100,000 men from every campaign for those who suffer from depression, anxiety, other physical manifestations of the strain of war, something that's becoming increasingly recognized. Their number of people who applied to them for help was up nearly 10% last year. The Royal Air Forces Association. It's got 100,000 members. It says it's the largest single ex-services association. And among those marching today, the National Service RAF Association, who are particularly remembering those killed in Cyprus. It's the 50th anniversary of the end of the Cyprus conflict, and they're going to put a wreath. Cyprus 1955 to 59. 371 British soldiers died in Cyprus. They have a new memorial at Kyrenia, and that was in the emergency against EOKA's battle for independence for Cyprus. They're followed by the Royal Air Force Mountain Rescue Association. This is the Federation of Polish Armed Forces Association, who played a vital role as pilots in the Battle of Britain, and particularly at the Battle of Monte Cassino. They're followed by the Hong Kong Ex-Servicemen's Association. The South Atlantic Medal Association, leading the contingent, John Phillips, was a bomb disposal expert, lost an arm defusing a bomb on board HMS Antelope, and with that group, Major General Julian Thompson, who headed the operation in the Falklands. The War Widows Association, I hear this morning, and they have a new award, the Elizabeth Cross, which was given to the next of kin of those killed in war. It's a silver cross, and it has the name of the family member who was killed on it. All the various arms of the Fleet Air Arm. The Aircraft Handlers Association first, to carry out flight deck operations on board carriers. The telegraphists flew in the rear seats of aircraft from aircraft carriers. The Royal Naval Air Crews Association, the Fleet Air Armourers Association, who give firepower and air cover to Atlantic convoys responsible for the guns and the bombs and the missiles and the torpedoes. The Fleet Air Arm Association could have been in any of the various specializations. Fleet Air Arm Buccaneer Associations, the Buccaneer aircraft, which was flown as a strike aircraft in Indonesia and during the conflict in Borneo. The Fleet Air Arm Field Gun Association. Fleet Air Arm Officers Association is there, pilot observers, air traffic controllers, meteorologists, you name it. Among them, Captain Hackett, who made over 500 deck landings flying Buccaneers. Now, the Royal Navy, the corvettes and the Sea Harriers, the Ton-class ships, the Benevolent Trust, and the Submariners Association here. Submariners, the most mysterious life of all members of the Royal Navy, a very special group of people. When submarines were first invented, there was an international appeal to treat submarines as pirate vessels in wartime, because people were so unused to what they thought of as an underhand, unfair, and damned un-English way of fighting. Well, they proved their worth in the Second World War, and now, of course, carry Britain's nuclear deterrent. The Merchant Navy Association, Vivian Foster leading it. The Merchant Navy Association lost many lives, 32,000 lives lost in the Second War. This, the Royal Marines Association. The Corps formed way back in 1664 as the Admiral's Regiment. Since 1942, they've been Britain's commandos with their famous and much coveted green beret. And they're followed by the Fellowship of the Services. Fellowship of the Services came back after the First World War and literally sat around a brazier and decided to set up an organization so they could meet together. The Italy Star Association, celebrating the landings in Sicily and the battles at Monte Cassino, sometimes get forgotten that when the first Allied soldier landed in Normandy on D-Day, these people had already been fighting in Italy for 9 months. 84,000 British and Canadian servicemen and women lost their lives during the campaign in Normandy. The British Korean Veterans Association, again a war very largely fought by national servicemen. 40,000 British troops in all served in that war. Over 1,000 killed, over 1,000 taken prisoner of war. The Green Howards now first saw active service in Ireland in July 1690 at the Battle of the Boyne. And they're called the Green Howards because their colonel was Charles Howard, and they wore green uniforms. The other regiment wore buff uniforms, or buff facings, and they were called the Buff Howards. Again, the coveted beret this time of the Parachute Regiment. Field Marshal Montgomery said, "What kind of people are these who wear the red beret? They've jumped from the air and by so doing have conquered fear, shown themselves to be tenacious and determined. They are in fact men apart, every man an emperor." This year they were commemorating their famous drop on Pegasus Bridge in June 1944, and also of course their operation at Arnhem. The Germans used to call them the Red Devils because of their berets. Now the Royal Green Jackets. Marching for the first time, somebody who wanted this as his birthday present. Lawrence Cecil Curtis, born in 1919. The Royal Green Jackets have been fighting in Afghanistan. They lost 23 there. They're also famous for being the fastest marching regiment in the British Army. I don't know whether he knows that. 140 paces to the minute. Well, they're not doing that this morning because they'd cause total confusion if they did. The Grenadier Guards Association. These Grenadier Guards have a long, strong regimental tradition. No doubt we'll be remembering those killed last Tuesday in that terrible incident when they were training the Afghani police and one of the trainees turned on them, killed 3 members of the regiment. The Cheshire Regiment Association, the oldest county regiment this in the British Army. It fought particularly bravely at the Battle of Mons in the First World War, when it was attacked by 2 German army corps and in effect saved the British Expeditionary Force. The white hats of the Bevan boys, the miners, those who were by lottery told not to join the armed forces but to go down the mines. Ernie Bevan gave the name Bevan Boys to them, or they took the name from him. They tried to get 50,000 people to go down the mines, and they quite rightly and proudly take part in this march for the service that they gave in the Second World War. First Aid Nursing Yeomanry here, Princess Royal's Volunteer Corps, founded in 1907. the Commonwealth War Graves Commission. They were very engaged this year when the remains of bodies that had been undisturbed for 90 years at the Battle of Fromelles were discovered. Records suggest Australian dead, nearly 2,000, and British 500, and they will be buried along with the many other Commonwealth and British soldiers. 9,000 people in all have come here to take part today, and many, many more have been watching this ceremony in Whitehall or taking part in their own Remembrance Day events around the country. Many of them have vivid memories of those they've lost. Nigel Moffat remembers his son, Lance Corporal Moffat, who served in the Light Dragoons and who was killed in May this year on an operation conducted by the Brigade Reconnaissance Force in Afghanistan. His father wrote a poem for his son's funeral and read it out. He sees his son joining the end of the long line of all those killed in war.
There is in the eternal realms a great line of men who march along a long winding road. Their task is to collect the dead of ages taken from the ranks of the fallen. After midnight on the 30th of May 2009, the great line halts and a sergeant major's voice rings out, not as on the parade ground, but in the solemn silence increased. The short command is given: get fell in to the rear of the column. 2 soldiers take their place, adjust their equipment, and calm their troubled expressions. These fallen 2 shoulder arms, and the great line of men, the dead of ages, taken from the ranks of the fallen, moves off at a slow march, wending its way along the long winding road. Almost out of sight, the line visibly halts, and a sergeant major's voice rings out, get fell in to the rear of the column. And we, who mortals be, strain to hear the sound of their marching feet.
Sad and poignant words to end this Remembrance Sunday. The young often think of themselves as immortal. War teaches that it's not so. From this commemoration at the Cenotaph, from Whitehall, good afternoon.
On the way next, here on BBC Two, James May's Toy Stories.
16th on BBC 4.
When am I beautiful? Is it now? Or now? Now maybe? Tell me, when? Is it now? Am I beautiful now? Or am I only truly beautiful now? What happened to beauty in art? The debate begins. The Modern Beauty Season. Saturday at 8:30 on BBC